Hello, and welcome back to the Buffalonian Podcast, Betting on the Bills. I am your host today, Dom Loss, and I am actually joined by the side chair as the producer, Mooch.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here.
Happy to be here on the December 30th. Not our typical recording day, but is what it is when you're on Christmas break. Kind of get late starts to the day, and here we go. Last pod of the year. Kind of stunning to think about that, but here we are previewing the Buffalo Bills hosting the New England Patriots in kind of a must-win-ish type of game. Again, kind of the opponent and still a lot of at stake for the Bills' playoff hopes, even though they are now risen from, I believe they were as low as 15% at one point, all the way now to, some people have it like in the low 90s, some people have it in the 80s. Otherwise, it's good stock right now, But Mooch, what are you looking forward to most about this rematch from the Week 7 game in New England?
Yeah, well, I think it's funny that both of us, when we started the show, have that first matchup in Week 7 in front of us because of just how disgustingly putrid it was as the taste in our mouth leaves us Bills fans. You know, the Pats have won only a handful of games, and it's embarrassing to say that one of those games is against a team that really shouldn't be losing to the Pats. Looking at the stat line, the game was ugly from start to finish. First play from scrimmage is an interception. They let Mac Jones go down the length of the field. I think that the Bills snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. And I think that with some cleaner play, it'll be a much different result.
Yeah, I think, when you look back, well, first off, I think the Bills are actually playing, 4D chess and everyone else is playing checkers, allowing the Patriots to win a game. So now the Patriots are 4-11, and they currently are the fourth pick.
The fourth pick, which would,
and if they would have lost the game to the Bills, they would have been the second pick, if I'm not mistaken. So technically, that's some 4D chess right there from the Bills to allow the Pats to win a game, so they don't get a top quarterback and still make the playoffs potentially. But nevertheless, kind of half kidding.
I didn't think about that. That's a good point.
Half kidding, but when you look at the game from early this season, the Patriots didn't run the ball particularly well with their running backs. The top two running backs combined for 65 yards on 20 carries. Obviously, they got that end-around play to Pop Douglas for 20 yards, but the Bills did a good job on really the run defense, which you think would be the most problem against New England because they want to run the ball. But Mac Jones, 25 for 30, had his highest pass rating at 127.7, and I think the thing that you remember the most about that game is his average depth of target was about 3.4 yards, which is pretty putrid. So the Bills just did a horrific job tackling. They did a horrific job on the screen game, which we all know the Bills are, for whatever reason, just get killed on screens. So I think that's really the biggest key to the game for the Bills is Zappe, ever since he's taken over, ranks 29th in the NFL in average depth of target. He's been one of the worst quarterbacks in the entire league since he's taken over. I would assume the Patriots aren't going to change their game plan so much and just start chucking the ball down the field. It's going to be very similar to Week 7. And well, I think that the Bills' defense has obviously improved from that moment. It's still a challenge to make sure you could do it against this team.
Yeah, and something that I'd like to point out actually in the ebbs and flows of this Bills season, this was kind of the beginning of the tailspin for the midseason for the Bills because they're coming off of that win against the Giants that was way too close. And frankly, if you're agreeing or disagreeing with the call, it very well could have been a loss, which would have been back-to-back losses following that Jacksonville defeat in London, at home, of course. And that's where the Bills lost two of their key pieces in Matt Milano and Daquan Jones on defense. And so I think you began to see a little bit of a shift in what their game plan was, missing those two talented players. So going on the road and facing this New England team was the beginning of a tailspin for this team finding their identity. And it's just interesting to me to see how different Buffalo is going into this matchup. And it gives me a lot more hope. I think that going into the Pats game in Week 7, you said, how are they going to miss Milano? You got Terrell Dodson, you got Dorian Williams, who's going to be the linebacker? I think they've kind of not figured it out per se, but they're a much more confident team than they were out of that tailspin against the Giants and Jags.
No, I would agree. I think going into that matchup, there was the question of who was starting at linebacker, and they were still kind of, going back and forth between Dorian and Tyrell Dodson to the point. And I'm really not the biggest Tyrell Dodson fan. He has played significantly well, especially against the run. So I think that's a big change. But it's all about if the Bills can tackle in space, because the Patriots got pass plays at 33 yards, 19 yards, 26 yards, 34 yards, 25 yards. I mean, that's just ridiculous for this. It's not like you're facing, I don't know, should say even the Chiefs anymore, but it's not like you're facing the Dolphins, who are just a supreme explosive passing play. So I think that would be the biggest concern. But offensively, it just starts to what are they going to do? I think the biggest question coming into this game, I want to see your thoughts, is how much more are they going to run the ball compared to passing? Because under Joe Brady, the 5 games, now we have a 5-game sample, they've run the ball more than passed. Now, if you take away the Cowboys game, I think that's probably an important, it's more closer to 50-50, but really, you'd want to pass the ball 45% of the time, maybe a little bit more than that, just to drop back, especially when you have a drop back quarterback like Allen. Now, they've ran the ball successfully, but I think you saw maybe a little bit of that problem against the Chargers of them maybe leaning a little bit too much into the run game and then having to go into second and long and kind of having to convert third downs because you didn't, you're in second and long. So what would your ideal percentage of run versus pass be for this Bills offense to optimize their most efficient?
Yeah, so all the things you said make a lot of sense to me, especially in Joe Brady's scheme and how he likes to utilize the run. What I don't like about this Patriots team is that I think their 2 best defensive players by far are Christian Barmore and Devon Godchow, and they've been pretty good at stopping the run this season. I'm not a huge fan of running against them with Leonard Fournette, and James Cook off that Chargers game didn't look great. But again, we also have to remind ourselves what happened the week before in that Cowboys game where he absolutely took over a game. And you'd want to see that. You'd want to see a game be, utilize the run and take the ball out of Allen's hand just to take what the defense gives you. But I think we're also forgetting that this rematch from week 7 was actually the coming out party of Dalton Kincaid. So Dawson Knox's last game before really going on the IR was that Giants game, and you could tell that something wasn't right. He had some drops in that game, and Dalton Kincaid came out 8 receptions, 75 yards. He led the team in receiving yards that day. And even though Stephon Diggs didn't end up with a touchdown and James Cook did have a receiving touchdown of his own, that was really the first time we saw what our first round tight end was going to look like. So I think that there's benefits to passing more. Especially on both sides of the ball. Simply, what I mean by that is I'm not comfortable with running against those powerhouses they have at DT on that D-line. And I know Kincaid is a different player this week because he's maybe banged up, and maybe Diggs as well. I'd like to see a little bit more pass than run, though.
Yeah, I mean, 8 for 8 on targets and receptions for Kincaid in week 7. Knox played and had that crucial 4th down drop, and that was kind of like he needed to get surgery on that wrist. Diggs kind of had a 6 out of 12, not a great performance. Davis only had 1 catch on 5 targets. So I think it's an interesting game from the perspective of the pass catchers really need to bounce back. Other than obviously, I think Kincaid had a good game, and Cook 3 catches on 3 targets for 46 yards and a touchdown, as you alluded to. So I think getting the running backs involved will be important, especially if Jabril Peppers is not going to play. He's questionable with a hamstring, didn't practice all week, and then he got a limited practice yesterday. So for me, it's about if the Bills can dominate the middle of the field. That's crucial for this offense. They were able to do it pretty effectively in week 7 at times. I think they're, it's one of the easier throws, and maybe to get Diggs more open in the middle of the field, get some yak. Maybe we could get Kincaid going a little bit because he's, I don't know if to say struggling is the right word, but he's obviously has his production dip, not just because of Dawson Knox, but because of injury as well, as you alluded to. So I think that's crucial. Then before we go into the injury report, I would say Josh, if you look at his stats in the game, 265 yards, 2 touchdowns. Obviously, he had that interception on the first play, as you alluded to, with Jabril Peppers. Also, quote-unquote, had a fumble loss, so good for all those turnover machine merchants, because that didn't really count because, that's a lateral play. I actually can't remember. I think Diggs has a fumble loss, too, because of the Jacksonville one, if I'm not mistaken.
I thought he had the fumble in the Pats game. He didn't get charged with that fumble? Yeah, no, Diggs got charged with that fumble in the Pats game on the final lateral play.
Which one?
I believe so. I thought Diggs got charged with that fumble.
No, I think Diggs got charged with the fumble with Jacksonville. Either way. if you look at his numbers, you would have thought he had like an all right day. But really, I think Josh had one of his worst days of the year because of his inability to play the quarterback position efficiently. He was Bill Belichick really took him to the woodshed. With his pressures, Josh checking out good plays to bad plays, not being incredibly accurate with the football. So it really wasn't a great day from Josh. And this is prime Ken Dorsey era too. So maybe with Joe Brady and a new look. A new headspace. Josh, no more of this low positive BS. More, I'm gonna run you over MFers kind of Josh.
I think I'm back.
Yeah.
I'm not saying the word he said, but I think I'm back during the Jets game.
Yeah, more Terminator Josh. I think we'll get a brand new, spanking new Josh Allen. Obviously, he's off the injury report as well, as we're gonna dive into that in 2 seconds with the shoulder. So obviously, he must be feeling a little bit better. But yeah, I think Josh having a little bit more of a bounce back game from the quarterback position. Getting Diggs involved, I think it's going to be the passing game involved is crucial, and just tackling well is going to be crucial. Also, obviously, I think this goes without. I say this every week when they play these teams that aren't very good, and they always seem to do it. So I feel like a little bit of a jinx, but I'm just going to say it. You can't have a special teams gaffe, and you can't turn the ball over.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they did in that Chargers game that you're referring to. I'm imagining.
Yeah.
Special teams gaffe that really turned the tide of things. In fact, I believe that special teams fumble by Deontay Harder was the only touchdown drive for the Chargers, and the Bills' defense held up well on those drives, holding them to only field goals. So I think it's iconic that the special teams gaffe that you're so adamant about is the only touchdown drive that put the Bills in danger in that Chargers game.
Yeah, I think that leads to kicking field goals, making your field goals, solid punting, solid return game, as they didn't have in the Chargers game, and then obviously. Just turnovers in general. I mean, they had 3 last game, just unacceptable, especially one by James Cook on the first play of a drive, which basically gifted them with 3 points. As you alluded to, Josh, another bad interception, gave them good field position, pretty much gifted the Chargers 3 points. So I think for the Bills, it's about, playing complementary football, and they got to be able to do that in order to win the game. I just remember that Tyler Bass missed a field goal against New England. I completely just remembered that off the top of my head when I was talking about field goal missing. So it was 42 yards. So yeah, hopeful for a bounce back performance. But let's go into this injury report. Talking about the Bills, looking fairly healthy. A couple guys missed practice here and there, but Ty Johnson seems to be returning. So we'll see if Leonard Fournette gets elevated for this game. Maybe he still does, and they scratch Tavius Murray. Tavius Murray didn't get a touch last game, and even Leonard Fournette got the goal line, so we don't fully know there. Micah Hyde returning, so it's good to have the veteran back, but hopefully I didn't think we were ever going to see him again because of that stinger issue. Kind of a similar situation with Brock Purdy's dealing with in San Fran, of just, it's the second stinger of the year. Also, already having that neck injury from the previous season is definitely a scary sight. But other than that, maybe we get AJ. Maybe. I
love that.
I don't think so. I know we had the full practice on Friday, but it just seems like it'd be a wiser idea to wait one more week and let that rib heal up a little bit more. But obviously, the bigger question is Daquan Jones, the return. What do you think he brings to the lineup now? Maybe probably not. Definitely not at 100%, but even with 80-70% Daquan Jones.
Yeah, no, I love Daquan Jones. I'm so excited about his return. I think that, if there was such thing as a quarter season All-Pro, I think that Daquan Jones would have earned it. He was absolutely dominant in those first couple games. That Washington game, that Miami game, he was a game wrecker. And it was really unfortunate seeing him go out because you could really see the tailspin that the defense had after that Jags game. We alluded to it earlier that they lost in that Jags game. They almost lost to the Giants at home, and then they did lose to these New England Patriots that we're talking about. And it was because of the losses of Milano and Daquan Jones that this defense kind of had to figure out who their leader was. And Daquan Jones, he brings in double teams, he takes on blocks, and he elevates the games of the people around him. And I think Ed Oliver himself has had a good season, but man, I really just want to see a healthy Daquan Jones with Ed Oliver.
Yeah, I think it's a bonus star that Ed Oliver has been able to have an 8.5 sack season with Daquan playing 4 and 3 snaps of a 5th game. We talked about this when they all went down, all three. Trey White, Daquan, and Matt Milano I just didn't feel like they were going to be able to replace all of them. But it's really a credit to Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. I mean, they replaced Trey White with
Douglas. Yeah.
Douglas. They were able to get the best out of Tyrell Dodson, which didn't seem possible, seeing how awful he played in limited duty last year. But maybe not the middle linebacker position, but the weak side linebacker position is more of his style, and he's played well. And even that, one tackle, while it's been incredibly, frustrating with the inconsistencies, they've gotten at least somewhat some production from, Puna Ford last game had a nice game. I thought Tim Settle had his best game of the year last game against the Chargers. Getting Leval Joseph, who's had a positive impact, eating up blocks in the running game, maybe not getting on the stat sheet, but doing the little things that we wanted Stud Latule to do. So I think they've been able to obviously not get the production of those three players back, but they've been able to. I think earlier when we played the Patriots, as you alluded to, they were really hurting because Dodson wasn't playing his best football. They didn't know what to do with him and Williams. The one tech position was still kind of struggling. Cornerback, I mean, we had Benford, we had Dane Jackson. It wasn't going smooth per se. I also thought Taron Johnson played a really bad game last time they played the Patriots, which is one of a rare thing to say. But I'm excited to have Daquan back. He demands double teams. He's been very good against the run and the pass, eating out that. I think that's the biggest thing is that from that one tech position, they just haven't got that consistent pass rush. I think they've been kind of all right, maybe playing the run, but just pass rush rise. I mean, obviously Puna Ford had that nice spin move, but and Tim Siddle's had some flashes, but they just haven't got that consistent, guy that you have to worry about rushing the passer. And getting Daquan back will definitely open up everything, when they had to pin their ears back with Ed and Floyd and Greg and hopefully Vaughn. But other injuries, DeMar Hamlin's questionable with that shoulder injury that he suffered on special teams. Other than that, pretty healthy for the most. Obviously, not wish we could have Matt Milano back, but we can't have nice things. Looking at the Patriots.
Oh man.
Patriots just their injury report just makes me so mad because it's just so many people and it's like illness and whatever. But Kyle Duggar, they're due to all safety, missed practice on Friday. He's questionable with an illness. I assume he's gonna play. Zeke seems like he's gonna play. Juju's the only one that's actually out. There's just a lot of people that are questionable that seem like they're just gonna play. I just don't really know who to say is out. A lot of these guys have all been limited throughout the week. I think the only one that we alluded to earlier that may be probably out, who's questionable, is Jabril Peppers with a hamstring injury. Didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday and was limited Friday, so I bet he's probably more than a week, not more than a week, but probably more likely a week away. Everyone else, I just assume is going to play. I mean, it's the Patriots. I have no idea.
Yeah, no, you never know what Bill's thinking. And when I look at this Patriots injury report, I think of in those like cartoons where they unravel the scroll and it just keeps going and keeps going.
Yeah.
That's kind of what this injury report looks like to me. And I think it's funny that you mentioned that it probably isn't all that. You got 9 questionable players, 1 that's actually out, and at the end of the day, I feel like the majority of them, they'll play. But all these names that are on there are pretty big names, and even if they'll play, it's still big to see so many impact players for the Patriots be even listed on the injury report. I know one can make the argument that Josh Allen was on the injury report for so long, but you're missing, not missing, but you're seeing starting linemen, so many defensive pieces, a couple of wide receivers and offensive weapons, and as you alluded to earlier, Kyle Duggar, Jabril Peppers, that's a safety tandem right there. Mm-hmm. And you got to think about how the Bills are going to attack those weaknesses if those players aren't 100%.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that signals a big game from the tight ends and maybe the running backs. Obviously, they've used them a lot off the backfield. Didn't use them that much against the Chargers. I'm trying to make sure. I didn't see Dalton Kincaid on the injury report, so maybe he's getting healthier. I don't know. But it definitely will be an interesting game. But let's hit into these. Who do you think is going to be the X factor, and then who do you think is going to be the player of the game?
Yeah, so I guess I should say first, my X factor, without a doubt, is Stephon Diggs. I think that a big narrative of the Bills' offense these last couple weeks has been what's up with his usage, what's up with his role in the offense. They've found ways to win without him. It's honestly even kind of funny too when you look at Diggs' stats with just simple win-loss in the schedule, where when they were, winning and losing a couple games, his stat sheet was packed. And now that they've won games, they've been winning games without him. I do think that he's necessary in this New England game. I think when we talk about Stephon Diggs on the Bills, I always think back to some crucial catches and plays that he's made against the Pats. My favorite of them being the you touchdown. And so I think that with all these questions regarding how they're going to utilize them and how Joe Brady can use his receivers, I think that Diggs will be the X factor in the Buffalo Bills getting a victory today.
Yeah, I think that's a quality answer. I'm going to go with the tight ends, Knox and Kincaid. They had 9 catches for 85 yards in the first matchup. I think with a healthier Knox, maybe the health kind of balances out.
8 of those being Kincaid, yes.
But I just think there's going to be matchups underneath the Patriots zone that I think the Bills are going to be able to take advantage of, and maybe we'll see the first 100-yard game from Dalton Kincaid. I don't know, but I think there's a potential that both those guys get touchdowns, and I think both those guys will have big games underneath the Patriots defense, and I guess with the running backs as well potentially. But I just think tight end wise, there should be some big games, especially as you alluded to with the safeties kind of both being kind of banged up or feeling under the weather per se. But going to your player of the game, I guess I'll start with this one. I think the Bills defense got embarrassed. I mean, again, Mac Jones probably had his best game of his career. Totally his best game of the season, and he didn't really even do that much. That was incredibly impressive. And I thought Terry Johnson, as I alluded to, had his worst game of the year. And I think he bounced back in a big way and gets an interception or forced fumble, causes a turnover, has a more sound game. I think the whole defense plays better, tackling and also playing at home. I think will have a big impact. And I think he'll get a turnover and a sack because Bailey Zappi, well, he hasn't really turned the ball over that much. Has had 13 sacks in his starts, his last couple starts. So I think they'll get some pressure. I think Terran gets a sack and an interception for the boys.
No, I like that. And, in that same vein, I'm going to pick another defensive player that also has a name beginning with T. I'm going to go with Terrell Bernard. He had a fumble recovery in that Pats game, a pretty key one too. And earlier in the season, right before that Week 7 game, he was making splash play after splash play. And it's not that he hasn't been doing that, but I would love to see another splash play from him here in this Pats game. I'd like to see him take advantage of Bailey Zappi, who I was thinking about this earlier. How many times the Bills even played Bailey Zappi? I think every Mac Jones era Pats Bills game was Mac Jones. I don't recall if they've ever actually played Bailey Zappi.
No, they haven't.
So I would love to see Terrell Bernard get a splash play, whether it be a punch-out fumble or a big sack. I want to see the Terrell Bernard that played in that Week 3 matchup versus the Commanders. And I know it's a different team, but I'd like to see that kind of dominant performance. So I'm going to go with Terrell Bernard.
Can't really go wrong there. Bernard also had a big sack against the Chargers. You would have thought to get them a tough field goal attempt, but it seems like every kicker makes every kick against the Bills. But Chad Ryland, he struggled last week. Obviously, made the big 56-yarder, so maybe he's down. Down to miss a kick. I don't know. That's the tough part about being a Bills fan. It seems like every opposing field goal was gone this year, and T-Bass has been. I don't want to say unreliable, but up and down is probably the right word. But
he was the GOAT Bills kicker until we called him that on the podcast. So
that's true.
That's why we refrain from doing special team shoutouts anymore with Sam Martin and Tyler Bass falling off after we give them their credit.
Mm-hmm. A brief weather. Right before we do our picks, we'll do a brief weather. 37 and cloudy, so not too bad. There doesn't seem to be any precipitation, obviously later in the day, but the game's at 1 o'clock. It is actually the first 1 o'clock game since the Patriots game in Week 7, so good for us there. As people that, as I am a pro 1 o'clock stan, that is very exciting.
Yeah, not many of them this year, huh?
No, not at all. Well, you gotta think the Dolphins game was 1 o'clock, the Commanders game, the Raiders game. I don't know, a lot of them are 1 o'clock, but time for the big score predictions. The Bills are up to a 14-point favorite with an over-under of 40. So I think Vegas is looking at this to be kind of a 24-10 type of game in that aspect of it. And now that we are back from our brief, not technical delay, but we had a guest star come in, my father, JTL, making his first appearance on the pod. How are you feeling?
Feeling pretty well. I just came in because you're broadcasting in the office here, and I was getting the checkbook, so I get ready to pay you guys' tuition for the year. So happy to be on the pod.
Happy holidays to the rest of us. So obviously the Bills are 14-point favorites. We went over our players of the game. Mike picked Terrell Bernard. I picked Taron Johnson. X factors went Diggs and the Bills tight ends. Who are your X factors and players of the game for the Bills in this game?
Well, I think the X factor is against Stephon Diggs. Even though you're doing this by audio, I'm wearing his jersey. The Bills' passing attack hasn't been very good in the last 4 games, and although Stephon Diggs has had a number of targets, Josh Allen's passer rating over the last 4 games is in the 50s when he's targeting Stephon Diggs. And the Bills' receivers also have a pretty high drop rate in the last 4 games. So it's time for Stephon Diggs to come back and be the X factor.
Would he also be your player of the game?
Well, I went back and forth on that, but I hear a lot about let James cook, but I don't think it's going to be let James cook. I think it's going to be let Josh throw. So I'm going to go for the easy one for Josh Allen here, kind of balancing out since the two of you picked defensive players.
All right. Well, the Bills wide receivers have struggled the last couple of games, and Davis last time against the Pats 1 catch for 6 yards. So I don't know about that, but 14-point favorite. Do the Bills win? And then I guess we could do a alternate one. Do you think the Bills are going to win by 14 points or more?
Well, the Bills are going to win, no doubt about it.
Okay. Do you think they're going to win by more than 14?
Yes.
What's your score prediction?
Well, I looked into the history here, and I saw that Josh Allen has beat Bill Belichick 38-9, and also beat Bill Belichick in the perfect offensive game 47-17. So it's been going up 29 points, 30 points. So this time I'm predicting a 31-0 shutout.
Bold, and I love it. Very bold.
I'm trying to think of the last time the Bills won a game recently, 31-0.
So it's not Bill Scorigami, is what you're saying?
No,
we got to get a Bill Scorigami going.
The Bills actually beat the Patriots and Bill Belichick 31-0 one time.
That's what I thought. Well, they beat him in 03-02. Wasn't that the Sam Adams pick 6 big man rumbling?
Not sure. I can't remember that far back. I can only remember going to Niagara University for the electric company, training camp. So I can't get that far back. Although I'm excited to see Alex Austin return to Buffalo. So the 7th round draft pick who's waived and now is a Patriot defensive back.
Well, it didn't seem like he had a very good Saturday because the Notre Dame Fighting Irish killed his alma mater, Oregon State. The Beavs 40-8. That's scoregami if I don't say so myself. But Mooch, what's your score prediction?
Yeah, my score prediction is on the record officially 28-14. I think that it will be 28-7 until the Bills pull their starters. And so I do think the Bills win by 14 exactly.
So a push,
correct. But yeah, I think Josh Allen gets going early. I think he gets a score early. I think, Bailey Zappi and the boys, they might get a touchdown in that first half, maybe make it a close-ish score at halftime, but I really think that Josh Allen and this offense are on a different level than when they were in Week 7, and they're going to be out for revenge. They know every game is a playoff game. They got to go 1-0 each week, and I think they're going to come to play and win by 14.
Yep. So I had the score 24-14. I think this is going to be a close game until the fourth quarter. Listen, the Patriots are really bad. I mean, you can make a question that they're worse than the Chargers. They're both the same caliber team, but there's been too many so much evidence this year that the Bills just, for whatever reason, cannot get out of their own way when they play really bad teams.
Play down.
Yeah, to keep them in the game. So I think they're going to keep them into the game until the fourth quarter, and then the Bills are going to get that double-digit lead and kind of just sit on it. So I think a very enthusiastic 24-14, we're going to get under the 40-point total, and the Patriots are going to cover the spread.
Well, I'm just glad that the three of us are, the World Wide Web, WWW for the Bills here, and then we can all agree on that.
Well, I mean, who would be picking the Patriots in this game?
No, fair.
I guess who would be picking?
Who would have picked Patriots in Week 7?
That's true. That is true, but that will do it for our score predictions. We'll briefly talk about what we wanted to have happen for the rest of the weekend. You want to stay on for that one, JTL?
Sure.
I'd love him to, personally.
You want to run it? You want to say what do you think is the most optimum? Obviously, a Bills win, and then if Pittsburgh loses and the Bengals lose, the Bills would be into the playoffs. Do you think anything else happens that goes the Bills' favor, or is that all you're rooting for this?
Keeping it simple.
Yeah, keeping it simple. Just rooting for two teams to lose, or you just?
Well, actually, you can root for the Jacksonville Jaguars to lose as well, because there's five different scenarios on this week for the Bills to clinch with a win, and I'm not counting tie scenarios. And of course, the Bills play at 1:00, and every scenario has the Bills having to beat the Patriots. But that also at 1:00, you have you hope the Houston Texans lose, you hope the Indianapolis Colts lose, and that you hope the Jacksonville Jaguars lose, and then that opens up the 4:00 window when you hope that both the Steelers lose and the Bengals lose. So there's 5 different combinations that are there. I mean, obviously, if the Bills win, let's start with that. Steelers lose, Bengals lose, Bills are in. There's also possibilities with Jacksonville losing as well, and possibilities with Houston and Indianapolis. So if 2 out of those 3 teams lose, Steelers, Bengals, and Jaguars, the Bills are in the playoffs. And we certainly don't want to have the Miami game count for the playoffs because, as you're probably you're aware, if the Bills could go into that, if the Bengals win out, the Steelers win out, the Bills beat the Patriots, and the Dolphins lose to the Ravens, in that final game, the Bills are either going to be the number 2 seed or they're going to be out of the playoffs, and we certainly don't want that.
Yeah, that would be a little too much stress.
Going all in there, huh?
But obviously Thursday, the Browns took care of business against the Jets, clinching the playoffs, and now they're even still a potential chance for the 1 seed. So I believe that eliminated the Bills' chances of being the 5 seed. I may be wrong on that, but I don't think they have the tiebreaker over the Browns.
I think you're correct.
So that eliminated that possibility. But
if it's 1, 3, and 5, they can't be. Off the top of my head,
I don't think they could be the 4. I don't know.
I don't think they could be the 4
I don't think they could be the 4 seed because if they go 11-6, there would be ahead. No, because if they win the division, they're ahead of the Chiefs because they would both be 11-6 at their max.
Mm-hmm.
So they could not be the 4. They could not be the 4, 5, or 1. They could be the 2. I said I don't even know if they could be. Well,
they can't be the 3 seed because they have the tiebreaker advantage over the Chiefs, and the 4 seed would be the Jacksonville, Indianapolis, Houston division, and they already have 7 losses.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
So it's 2, 6, or 7, or out.
But going into the other games, Lions, Cowboys, we're rooting for the boys because they beat the Cowboys, so it's just strength of record. Who cares? Giants, Rams, rooting for the Giants who beat the Giants. Niners, Commanders, rooting for the Commanders. Those two don't look very likely, but whatever. Dolphins, Ravens. We will be rooting for the Dolphins. We're rooting for the Ravens. Excuse me. I do think this gets interesting though. To your point about the scenario where it's 2 and out, is that if the Ravens win this game, they will be the 1 seed, and there could be potential where the Ravens just rest their starters in Week 18 against the Steelers. So that could be an interesting scenario. I guess Ravens Steelers. I doubt the Ravens are going to play that anyway. I mean, they would probably want to beat the Steelers. They beat them earlier in the year, but for the division purposes, obviously, if Miami wins or ties, it's over for the Bills' chances of winning the division for the 4th straight year. But then, who knows? We could still play them in the playoffs. I do believe that it's kind of highly likely that they play the Dolphins in the first round, but there's still chances that could happen. Most likely, the chances of that happening is if Buffalo is the 6th seed and Miami is the 3 seed, because the Dolphins don't have the Chiefs actually have the tiebreaker on the Dolphins with their head-to-head victory. So there's potential the Chiefs could be the 2, the Dolphins are the 3, and the Bills are the 6, and then they play each other. But then obviously Bills, Pats, rooting for the Bills. Cardinals, Eagles. I have a rooting for the Eagles because the Bills played them. Saints, Bucks, rooting for the Bucks. I don't know, I'm kind of just rooting for the Saints for that. I'm just done with the Baker Mayfield mania, kind of,
You're a Baker hater?
Not a Baker hater. I just think it's gotten a little, as you alluded to, JT, it's ups and downs, and It's a little too far up for my liking. But Raiders, Colts, rooting for the Raiders. We beat the Raiders. This is the bigger type of game. Panthers, Jaguars. This is kind of the swing game of how the week's gonna go because the Jags do kind of, if they lose, really do help the Bills a lot. Texans, Colts. Texans, Colts don't help the Bills that much unless both teams kind of lose. If one team loses, it still leads a lot of scenarios because they play each other. So obviously, the team that won this week could potentially still get to that 10-win mark next week. No, they don't play each other this week. Okay. The Texans play the Titans, and I can't remember. The Colts play the Raiders. So if the Colts win and the Texans lose, it doesn't a lot help the Bills because the Colts could just beat the Texans in Week 18 and get to 10 wins. You know what I'm saying?
Well, there won't be Trevor Lawrence this week.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
CJ Beathard show out there.
CJ Beathard, and that's why it's only a 4-point spread.
Bryce Young just put up probably had the best game of his rookie career so far against the Packers.
Yeah, and the Jags defense is like vulnerable. So yeah, that really the Jags game is the key game of the AFC South to really look at. Obviously, the Texans are going to get C.J. Stroud back against the Titans. Now they're at home. They already beat the Texans. They beat the Titans 2 weeks earlier with Case Keenum. So I don't know how favorable that will look for the Bills, but maybe C.J. Stroud's a little rusty. Bears, Falcons. That's just like the definition of a nothing burger for us.
Burger.
Yeah, I don't even know what. Yeah, no. Steelers, Seahawks. Obviously, rooting heavily for the Seahawks. Seems like Mason Rudolph is going to get the start for the Steelers, even if Kenny Pickett is healthy. So that should be exciting. Bengals, Chiefs. Obviously, rooting for the Chiefs, which is kind of just unfortunate to say out loud. In Arrowhead, so hopefully that impacts Jake Browning to have a.
You mean Burrowhead?
Or Browninghead.
Browninghead.
Chargers, Broncos. Rooting for the Chargers because we beat the Chargers. We didn't beat the Broncos. Packers, Vikings is, again, that doesn't matter.
Nothing burger?
As one would say, nothing burger. So, obviously, the easiest way for the Bills to make the playoffs is to win out. But it is nice to potentially have options if the Bills happen to fall in one of their next 2 games, really mostly just the Week 18 game. So I guess the question for the 2 people here is, do the Bills clinch a playoff berth in Week 17?
Absolutely.
Okay, Mooch?
I'm on the fence here. I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I think that the Chiefs have looked very vulnerable, and if we're talking about the 3 things that need to happen that are most likely to happen, being a Bills win, which I think will happen, a Seahawks win, which I think will happen, and then a Chiefs win over the Bengals, which I still think will happen. I don't feel 100% confident that the Chiefs will take care of business against Jake Browning.
Do you?
I think the Chiefs break of the 3 of them. I think the Chiefs won't get it.
So do you think then that replaces with the Panthers beating the Jags or no?
I don't think the Panthers will be able to beat the Jags,
All
even
right.
if it is led by CJ Beathard.
JTL, what's your path?
I'm going to take the Steelers losing. I'm going to take the Texans losing, and I'm going to take the Colts losing.
Oh.
Because I still don't want the Chiefs to make the playoffs. So, if Denver can still win the division.
The Raiders can still win the division too.
And so can the Raiders. So I'm still rooting for the Chiefs.
Well, if the Colts lose, the Raiders win. So then there would be a game out. That's actually an interesting scenario. I just think this is gonna be an easy as pie type of game. I think they will clinch. I think they'll take. First of all, I think they're gonna take care of business against the Pats, and then I think it's a tough place to play in Seattle, especially for Mason Rudolph. So I think that's a tough matchup for the Steelers, and then also with the Bengals, I just think Arrowhead's a different beast, and I think Jake Browning got a little bit exposed last week against the Steelers, and the Chiefs have one of the best, defenses in the entire NFL. And Mahomes and those guys aren't going to be up for that game. I think it's an easy scenario. I agree with Mucho. I don't think the Panthers are going to beat the Jags. Do you think the Panthers are going to beat the Jags?
Well, with Trevor Lawrence out, there's always a possibility. And think about the fact that the Bills lost to the Jags in the Urban Meyer era, so anything's possible in the NFL.
Any given Sunday.
So are you going to pick the Panthers, or? You scapegoat this to get it around the question.
Answer on the question.
No, I didn't pick the Panthers because that would have been the scenario that the Steelers lose and the Jaguars lose, and I don't think that's going to happen.
You think the Steelers are going to beat the Seahawks?
I think the Steelers are going to lose to the Seahawks, and the Jags are going to beat the Panthers.
Do you think Cincinnati's going to beat? Oh, you do think Cincinnati's going to beat Kansas City?
Yes.
Dad thinks they're going to miss the playoffs, Tom.
Yes, my pick is Steelers loss, Texans loss, Colts loss.
Then how confident are you that the Dolphins are going to lose to the Ravens?
Very confident.
Really?
Well, Jalen Waddle's out, and they're playing in Baltimore. And, as you know, Dom, you picked Lamar Jackson preseason to be the MVP of the whole league, and I think he's going to have another great performance against the Dolphins. And, again, having the Ravens at home is a big advantage.
Well, you do remember the last time the Dolphins played the Ravens in Baltimore.
Yeah, early in the season last year.
2 threw for 466 yards. I think some revenge is. I agree. I think the Ravens will get the job done. Last question before we head out of here: if the Bills win 2 games in a row, is Josh Allen the most valuable player in the league? We'll start with Mooch.
Yes.
I should make the caveat that he plays statistically well as well.
Yes. I think Josh Allen would have the perfect mix of stats and winning, because assuming that he wins next 2 games, you're saying he's going to put up decent stats. I'm not saying he won't have a turnover in there, but even let's say he does. I think he has such a lead on Lamar Jackson that if you want to argue that Lamar Jackson earns it because he's the 1 seed, if Josh Allen ends up the 2 seed with that much better stats, I don't think there's any way you cannot give it to him. The gap between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson in touchdowns is so much larger than the gap between Lamar Jackson and Joe Flacco. That's all I have to say. If you give this award to Lamar Jackson, you're setting a precedent that it's not based off of who plays well. It's just the quarterback on the best team. So, yes, Josh Allen will win the MVP if he wins out.
I agree that Josh Allen will be the MVP. Sorry to your Lamar pick down. Right. And the reason I say that is you answer the question at the end of the game to win the game this season, because I think Patrick Mahomes isn't playing well. Who do you want to have the ball? Mm-hmm. And everybody's going to say it's Josh Allen. And look at how many game-winning drives he's already had this year, and how many where he even got the team to lead, and then the defense couldn't hold on.
He's tied for second with those losses against New England, Denver, and Philly, which would have counted as game-winning drives if his defense held on, and he's still tied for second.
And look at he's already has 11 games with a passing touchdown and a rushing touchdown, an NFL record. In fact, he's extending his own NFL record in that respect. And so with Josh Allen, I think that and to Mike's point, Josh Allen would have gotten the Bills to be the number 2 seed, and I think that would be extraordinary. When they were 6-6, nobody would have thought that, and he's just basically put him on his back and carried him forward again.
I would agree. I think. Well, I guess the question would be also, if you added that, what scenario would be a higher chance that he wins MVP? If he wins 2 games and they win the division, or if they win 2 games and they don't win the division? What I mean by that is, if they win 2 games and win the division, that means Lamar Jackson and the Ravens are the number 1 seed in the AFC. If he wins 2 games and he doesn't win in the division, that means that the Dolphins beat the Ravens in Week 17, and Lamar still might be the 1 seed because of, what would happen in Week 18. But Lamar then would have another loss on his record. So, I guess I think it's interesting if the Ravens go 14-3. I think that's going to be tough for Josh to overcome that, just because I think the media bias of the turnover machine and kind of the quote-unquote losses that the Bills have on their record because of Josh, and that winning 14 games is impressive even without the stats. So which scenario would you think would be better?
No, that's a great question, because you're right. Depending on whether Josh Allen's team is the 2 seed or the 6 seed is really indicative of what happens in that Ravens-Dolphins game. I think that the 2 seed at the end of the day is the most realistic chance. I don't recall a time where the MVP was on a team that was a wild card. and even so, in modern day NFL, there does need to be a combination of winning and stats to win the MVP. Now, Lamar Jackson can go out there and beat the Dolphins, 20-13, and his defense gives him 5 takeaways like they did against the Niners, which I think in that regard, I guess off track here, from that Niners game, if you told me Lamar Jackson won that Niners game, I'd disagree with you. I think 5 turnovers, let's call it 4 turnovers because one of them was against Sam Darnold, and, that game was pretty much wrapped up by then. But 4 turnovers that gave Lamar great field position. Lamar is a great player and extends plays and is incredibly talented, but he is too far behind in yards. He is too far behind in touchdowns. He doesn't throw a lot of ints, and he doesn't turn the ball over a lot, which is good. But you know who else doesn't turn the ball over a lot right now? Case Keenum, who's been a backup most of the year. So I guess my argument for that is you're going to turn the ball over when you throw a lot. Josh Allen throws a lot. He scores a lot.
Well, it's important for two things, actually, is that Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are close in turnovers, but the yards thing, I will say, Lamar is, I think, about 20 yards shy of Josh Allen's total yards. I think when you allude to that, you mean passing yards.
Correct.
Because Lamar, I think, has about 300 to 400 more rushing yards. So I guess the question would be is if the Bills don't win, even if the Bills win out, per se, and they don't win the division, is Josh Allen done as the MVP? Does he have to win the division to be the MVP?
I think he does.
So even if he has 2 really good performances, the Bills win, they go 11-6, they're the 6th seed or whatever, you wouldn't give him the MVP.
I wouldn't, but I want him to be the MVP because of the Madden curse.
That would be funny.
But no, well. Last thing I just had to make a statement on is that Damar Hamlin is the comeback player of the year. If they want to make a most improved player of the year, I think that'd be a cool idea. But come on now.
I said it earlier. The comparison between Joe Flacco and Damar Hamlin is Joe Flacco sucked last year, doesn't suck now. Damar Hamlin died, is currently not dead. I think that if we're gonna talk about this story of pray for Damar and how the entire NFL world came together on a scary primetime Monday Night Football game, and everyone, even if you weren't a Bills fan, you were a Damar fan. And if you're going to tell me that Damar Hamlin survives and plays a snap, and he doesn't end up winning comeback player of the year, even if he hasn't played at all, and in those times he's played, he hasn't been good, I think that if we're going to talk about this story for years to come about how amazing it was for the NFL to come together, and you say, oh, well, surely Damar Hamlin won comeback player of the year because he came back and continued his NFL career to some extent. And you say, no, they gave it to Joe Flacco because he came off the couch and carried the Browns. And I think Joe Flacco is an amazing story. But Joe Flacco didn't die. This is a bigger award than football, and Damar Hamlin's story is bigger than football.
Well put, Mike. I believe that Damar Hamlin will be the comeback player of the year. Although there is a certain part of me that would hope it would be Joe Flacco, because to realize that the Jets had the quarterback that they needed all along is richly ironic. But Damar Hamlin is the comeback player of the year, and Joe Flacco is the couch potato of the year.
There you go. Well, he beat out Justin P for that award. Well, actually, it's kind of funny that Aaron Rodgers is 38, 39, and Joe Flacco is the same age. Who would have thought that the Jets would have kept their other 38, 39-year-old quarterback? They might be in the playoffs. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Buffalonian Podcast, Bidding on the Bills. I'm Dom Loss. I was joined by Mooch, the producer under the mic, and the special guest star, my father, JTL. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. And how do you always end these, Dom?
Go Bills, baby.
Go Bills.